Hi, and thank you for tuning into this video. Um, what I want to do with this video is have a look at some of the sample files that come with Alchemy Catalyst 10, the download from the website, and perhaps interact with some of these. In this case here, I want to have a look at Visual Studio and the native support that Catalyst 10 provides for the Visual Studio file formats. So as I look in the samples folder that comes with the download, I have a number of format folders which are new formats that are supported with this release. And what I want to do is have a look at the Visual Studio formats. There is support for C Sharp, for MFC, Microsoft Foundation classes, and for VB. So that covers C++ and .NET and the full gamut of folders, of file projects you may encounter. Um, we saw in an earlier video that the paradigm or the model that we use within Catalyst is to take any of the localizable file formats you require, drop them into a project, and perform localization tasks on them and output the localized content. And the same is true with the Visual Studio file format. So I'm going to create a new project, file, new, my first Visual Studio project. And there's one interesting thing to note here about Visual Studio. If I go to Tools Options and I have a look at Visual Studio settings, I have the choice to work with source or binary. So my model in my company might be a source-based localization approach where I will deal with things like ORC files for MFC or C Sharp or resx files or text or XML files for WPF, for example. And an alternate is where I deal with binary, in which case I'll be dealing with executables or .dlls. Okay, so the behavior of the parser will be governed by this option. I'm gonna use both here today, but let's for starters start with the binary. And if I just go back out to the folder structure that we saw, let's have a look at C Sharp, for example. Now, in a C Sharp project, this is a very simple C Sharp project, but it gets the point across. I may be a software developer who's been asked to localize my projects, and I don't necessarily understand what pieces of a project need to be understood by a localization tool, but what I do understand is the C Sharp project. I'm very familiar with the Visual Studio formats, and that's really what I want to do. I want to deal with that. So I take a C Sharp project and I drop that into Catalyst. The same is true. I could, like we saw earlier in previous video, I could right click on my project and choose to insert and browse to the CS Proj. Okay, I've inserted the CS Proj and I had my binary configuration switch on. So Catalyst has identified that there is a configuration called release. So there may indeed be 2 or 3 configurations within a CS Proj. You might have debug, you might have a release, you might have a number of configurations. So hence the reason for the dialog box. And because I have inserted the binary, Catalyst has followed the folder structure. Let's have a look. Catalyst has followed the folder structure. It has found the binary content and it's inserted that into my project. And if I just open up the executable, I now see the localizable content available for translation. Again, I'm seeing a string list, or if I flick into Visual View, I'm seeing a visual display. So that is C Sharp. Again, my life is made very simple. I don't need to understand all of the localizable aspects of a C Sharp project. I just deal with my CS Proj. As a software developer, that's the file format I'm very familiar with. Okay, let's go back into another format. If I deal with MFC, again, look at the complexity of these folder structures. I don't necessarily want to understand all of that. I'm used to dealing with a VCX Proj. So let me just take that and insert that into Catalyst. Again, it's going to be governed by the setting that asked whether I want to do insert source or binary. So because binary was switched on, Catalyst has gone and found the executable contained within that project, opened the executable, at which point I'm now seeing dialog boxes, string tables, images, etc. Okay. And lastly, and for completion, we will just take the Visual Basic format. Again, a lot of complexity in these projects. Catalyst's job is to remove that from the user. We're just taking the VB Proj, and again, there is a release configuration in each of these projects. Having dropped those files into my navigator, okay, I can open that and I can see the localizable content. Now what's significant here is that this is binary localization, so we've inserted an executable, albeit that we found it through the VB Proj. What will be extracted, of course, is the localized. The VB Proj doesn't normally get edited during localization, so what gets edited here is the binary executable. So if I localize this content and then perform an extraction, the localized binary will be extracted to disk. Okay, now having done the source, the binary based localization, we now want to have a look at source. We'll flick that switch and see what how these things behave differently. So let's create file new again, but this is my first source. Okay, so I've now created a source-based localization project. It's an empty project, but let's go and do the same thing, having changed, did I change the option? Tools, options, source files. So now Catalyst has been instructed to insert source files when it comes across Visual Studio projects. So again, I drag and drop that content, and Catalyst is doing all the hard work. It understands these projects inside out. It knows where the localizable strings are. It has identified the resx file. In this case, it needs to be localized. If I select the resx, I see, in the usual way, I see content that needs to be translated. There may also be further files, string list here to be translated, so that okay, so I can extract my content properly. In the case of VCX Proj or a VC Proj with earlier versions of Visual Studio, the source code is an RC file. So Catalyst has inserted the RC file. We're seeing our dialogues and our string tables. And lastly, for completeness, let's insert the C#. Of course, with source code, I don't need to worry about the configurations. There aren't different source code additions for release or for debug. So Catalyst knows which source files to insert, and it will allow me to localize the content. If I go and edit this, now I can complete my translation in that fashion. And if I go to perform an extraction, again, because this is a demo edition, I should see a message here. Is it going to do that for me? Nope. Because this is a demo edition, perhaps the extraction isn't going to perform there. But the idea being that the localized resx files will be generated for me, and the CS Proj in this case will be updated. So when an edit is made to a C# project, when a localization file is added, there is a new file added to the project, which means that Visual Studio can continue to compile that content in all knowledge of the new files that have been added. Okay, hope you found that a useful video on the new interaction with Visual Studio formats for Catalyst 10. Okay, thank you for listening.